The discovery did not come with a trumpet blast, a palace announcement, or a public ceremony. It came in silence, inside a locked royal archive, when a sealed folder bearing the Queen Mother's breast private cipher was opened for the first time in decades. And when Princess Anne heard what had been found, the woman known for never flinching was left stunned, motionless, and unable to speak. Before we go deeper into what this really means for the royal family, make sure to subscribe so you don't miss a single update. Anne reached for the table as the archivist began reading. The words did not sound like ordinary family history. They sounded like a judgment left by someone who knew what the future might bury. The Royal Archive, the protected collection where private letters and sensitive records are kept, had been under review when the sealed folder appeared. This was not a forgotten note among estate papers. It had been preserved apart, guarded by silence, and marked for family. The archivist kept steady, but Anne heard the tremor beneath it. The document recommended that she be entrusted as the moral guardian of the Queen Mother's private legacy, including personal letters, ceremonial wishes, and household instructions. A final recommendation, in plain terms, was not a law. It was a written expression of trust about who should protect a legacy after death. Yet this one carried force, because it named Anne not for rank, but for judgment. Charles received the news, and the king did not answer. He read the first page, then placed it down, as though the paper had become too heavy. Charles understood why this mattered. The Queen Mother had stood for royal discipline, a way of guarding the crown from emotion. If she had chosen Anne, then she had drawn a line around who could be trusted near her memory. A handwritten note changed the air. It warned that the contents concerned judgment, continuity, and the protection of the crown's inner memory. Anne looked at those words and felt the shock settle into something colder. The crown's inner memory meant the private stories and instructions that shape how a monarchy understands itself before public view. If the Queen Mother had sealed that warning separately, she had meant it to survive anyone who later found it uncomfortable. The explosive detail was not Anne's name. It was the reason behind it. Somewhere inside that sealed history lay the moment that convinced the Queen Mother only Anne could carry this burden. But before the palace could understand why Anne had been chosen, they had to confront the people whose futures were tied to one woman's final words. A royal recommendation is never just a sentence on paper. It is a mirror held up to everyone it touches. In this case, the Queen Mother's final words pulled Anne, Charles, William, Camilla, and the palace archivists into the same emotional storm. Each person saw something different in the document: duty, rejection, vindication, fear. And for Anne, the discovery felt less like an honor than a burden. Anne did not celebrate being named. She absorbed it like a blow. The final recommendation, a private written instruction left to guide the family after death, mattered because it did not praise her charm or position. It praised discipline. It trusted the one royal who had spent her life serving without asking to be adored. Anne understood that kind of trust could never be worn like a medal. It had to be carried like weight. Charles read the page again and felt the past leaning over him. The Queen Mother belonged to an older royal world, one built on restraint, memory, and sharp judgment. To the king, her words mattered because they judged the present through standards he could not easily dismiss. Charles had built his reign on personal survival and public repair, yet this document reminded him that monarchy also keeps score in silence. Camilla heard the meaning before anyone softened it. The queen consort learned that the recommendation had bypassed her household influence, and her face hardened in a way no one missed. She did not argue. She did not ask for a copy. Camilla simply pushed back her chair and left, but the quiet exit said what anger could not. The Queen Mother had drawn a circle, and she was outside it. William watched Anne more closely than the folder. The prince saw how his aunt's hand tightened, how her eyes moved across the second page, how shock became understanding. William knew why that mattered. Anne was not reacting to personal advancement. She was recognizing a duty that could reshape who controlled the family's private memory. The future king sensed that she had grasped the danger before the room caught up. The archivists revealed the next wound through a documented archive note attached to the file. The recommendation had been written after a private family episode that changed the Queen Mother's view of who could protect royal memory. A second page listed names, duties, and exclusions, proving this was not symbolic praise. It was a practical instruction. Anne saw the exclusions, then looked up slowly. Because the pattern was clear, the burden became sharper. The document did not merely say Anne was trusted, it explained why others were not. Charles felt the old family order pressing against his reign. Camilla felt the boundary closing around her. William felt the future narrowing into a choice between comfort and truth. And Anne, stunned by the force of it all, realized the recommendation had been triggered by one buried incident the palace could no longer ignore. And as the archivists turned back the years, one forgotten moment began to explain why the Queen Mother had made such a deliberate choice. The road to that sealed folder began long before it was discovered. It began at a private luncheon at Clarence House, during the final phase of the Queen Mother's life, when a quiet conversation turned into a warning no one understood at the time. What happened that afternoon did not make headlines. It did not reach the public. But inside the family, it became the moment everything changed. Anne remembered the story as the archivist read from the documented household account. Clarence House, a royal residence used for private family meetings and official duties, had hosted a luncheon that seemed ordinary on the surface. Yet the guest list mattered, because the room brought together family affection, household authority, and old royal discipline. Sensitive family correspondence meant private letters that could shape how future generations understood the crown. That was why access to those papers could never be casual. The aide made the request too smoothly. He asked to review personal correspondence before proper authority had been granted, and the silence that followed cut through the room. Anne noticed it at once. She did not raise her voice. She simply asked who had approved the request, why the papers were needed, and whether the Queen Mother herself had agreed. The aide tried to answer, then stopped, because the princess had already exposed the weakness in the demand. The Queen Mother watched every second. She saw Anne protect a boundary, without turning the moment into a spectacle. Later, according to a private note recorded by a senior courtier, she told that same courtier that the princess understood limits without needing to be taught twice. That sentence mattered because it did not describe politeness. It described trust. The monarch's mother believed Anne knew the difference between service and possession. Charles felt the pressure from both sides. He wanted peace around the table, but he also understood royal procedure, the plain system of rules that decides who may handle private papers and why. Camilla saw the moment differently. She felt Anne's intervention as a personal slight, not a safeguard. The queen consort held her expression, but the hurt settled quickly, and Charles saw that hurt before the luncheon ended. The archived account made the buried truth impossible to soften. That luncheon became the direct trigger for the final recommendation, a written judgment naming Anne guardian of the Queen Mother's private legacy. The document showed fear beneath the formal language. Fear that sentimental access, informal influence, and emotional pressure could bend royal memory into something convenient. Anne heard those words decades later and understood why her shock had felt so heavy. The warning had never been about paper alone. It was about who could touch the past without reshaping it. Charles understood the accusation hidden inside that idea. Camilla understood the boundary it created. Anne understood the duty it placed on her shoulders. That warning would soon move from archived memory into living conflict, because the next conversation could no longer be avoided. The confrontation did not happen in a grand stateroom. It happened behind a closed door, with no cameras, no smiling aides, and no ceremonial language to soften the blow. Anne entered with the recommendation in her hand. Charles stood waiting near the window. Between them lay not only a document, but decades of family loyalty, resentment, grief, and duty. Anne had read the full recommendation twice before asking for the meeting. She refused to let aides reduce it into a neat palace summary, because she knew summaries could soften the edges that mattered most. The recommendation, a written final instruction expressing the Queen Mother's trust and wishes, mattered because it carried emotional authority, even without being a public command. Charles understood that. The king knew his grandmother's voice still had power inside the family, especially when that voice spoke from beyond the grave. Anne placed the folder on the table and did not sit down at first. She told Charles this could not be treated like a dusty archive note, not when it named duties, boundaries, and limits. The Queen Mother's private papers, meaning letters and instructions never meant for public handling, were not trophies to be interpreted for convenience. They were memory. They were evidence of intent. And Anne knew that whoever controlled those papers could shape how the family remembered itself. Charles set his glasses down slowly. The gesture was small, but the hurt behind it was not. He felt the recommendation reaching past him, judging choices made during his reign, and he struggled to hide the sting. The king did not reject his grandmother's words, but he could not ignore what they implied. If Anne had been named because she protected boundaries, then others had been quietly measured and found unsafe near them. Anne revealed the most painful line through the documented account attached to the file. It stated that no one should interpret, release, or reshape the Queen Mother's private papers without strict consultation. She read it aloud once, then stopped, because Charles had already understood the meaning. The instruction did not accuse Camilla by name, yet it challenged the Queen Consort's informal influence over household narratives and future commemorative decisions. Camilla's presence was not in the room, but her shadow was. Charles looked toward the folder as if it had become a living witness. He knew palace narratives mattered because they shaped public memory, and public memory shaped legitimacy. He also knew commemorations mattered because they decide whose pain is honored, whose loyalty is preserved, and whose version of the past becomes official. Anne did not soften her voice. She told him the Queen Mother had left a boundary, not a suggestion. The confrontation ended without shouting. That made it worse. Charles asked the question that changed everything. Who now had the power to enforce it? Anne did not answer at once, because the silence already had. That question shifted the crisis from family emotion to royal authority, and suddenly every corridor wanted to know who truly controlled the Queen Mother's final wishes. Power inside a monarchy does not always wear a crown. Sometimes it sits in a locked cabinet, stamped on a memorandum, protected by archivists who know the weight of signatures. The Queen Mother's recommendation did not command an army or change a law. Yet inside the palace, it carried a cold force no one could dismiss, because it touched memory itself. Anne stood beside the table while the senior archivist explained what the folder controlled. The recommendation was tied to private papers, ceremonial guidance, and legacy interpretation, not public constitutional power. Constitutional power means the legal authority that decides how the crown functions in government. But this document worked differently. Family memory shapes reputation and trust. Whoever guided the Queen Mother's legacy could influence how the monarchy explained its past. The senior archivist's voice tightened when he reached the sealed instruction. He told Anne the folder carried a warning. The language must not be diluted, softened, or translated into palace convenience. Anne listened without interruption, but her expression changed when the truth landed. This was custodial authority, meaning a duty to guard someone's wishes and stop selective use. Anne felt honor turn into burden. She knew refusal would look like abandonment. The Queen Mother had trusted her to preserve intent, not to decorate history. The senior archivist watched her face and understood that she had accepted the weight. Anne finally asked one question. Who had permission to see the restricted appendix? The answer unsettled the room. The recommendation gave Anne final consultation rights before sensitive Queen Mother materials could be shown to family members or used in palace messaging. Palace messaging means the careful public wording the household uses to explain events and memories. That power mattered because one released phrase could reshape a legacy. One softened sentence could turn a warning into tribute. Anne opened the appendix and read the line that changed everything. Certain personal letters were not to be interpreted for convenience. The words struck harder than an accusation. They suggested someone might bend the Queen Mother's private meaning to fit public need. Anne closed the page slowly, and the senior archivist lowered his eyes, as if he felt judgment pressing into the room. The first consequence came quickly. A planned household review was paused before noon, and access to several Queen Mother files was frozen until Anne issued written guidance. Camilla felt it immediately. The Queen Consort learned that material expected to pass through familiar channels now required Anne's approval. Camilla did not need anyone to explain the message. The folder had spoken quietly, but its shockwave moved fast, and she was the first to feel the walls shift around her. The fallout began with a pause. A meeting was delayed. A file was withheld. A household aide was told that access required Anne's approval. In palace life, those small gestures can speak louder than public humiliation. For Camilla, the message was unmistakable. The Queen Mother's final recommendation had not merely elevated Anne, it had drawn a boundary. Camilla received the update while seated at a small writing desk, and her hand stilled over an unopened envelope. The scheduled review of Queen Mother materials had been suspended until Anne gave formal guidance. Future commemorations, meaning royal events or tributes designed to honor someone's memory, mattered because they shaped how the public remembered the past. If Anne controlled the materials behind those tributes, then Camilla could no longer assume familiar channels would open for her. Charles tried to reassure her, but the king could hear the restraint in his own voice. He told Camilla the matter was procedural, yet she knew procedure had become the language of rejection. The Queen Consort looked at him and understood what he could not say plainly. The discovery had created a rule he could not simply overturn without appearing to dismiss his grandmother's final judgment. Anne did not send a long statement. She sent a short instruction, clean and firm. No private material should move without a written archive record and named accountability. An archive record, in plain terms, is the official note showing who handled a document, when it moved, and why. That detail mattered because it ended quiet access. It made every request visible. It turned influence into something that had to leave fingerprints. Palace staff understood the shift before anyone said it aloud. Aides who once treated legacy papers as part of ordinary household flow now paused before arcing for them. One secretary outside Camilla's office lowered her voice when mentioning the Queen Mother's files, and another quietly checked whether Anne's approval had been logged. Camilla felt the caution gathering around her like closed doors. She had not been publicly named, but she had been privately limited. Charles watched the change with growing discomfort. The king wanted peace, yet peace now required accepting that Anne's authority had weight. He knew why the recommendation mattered. It protected the Queen Mother's private legacy from being shaped by emotion, and it proved that old royal trust could still overrule present closeness. Camilla knew why it wounded. It suggested that proximity to the crown did not equal permission to touch its deepest memory. Anne felt no triumph. She read the first access request, set it aside, and asked for the supporting record before making any decision. That one small demand confirmed the new reality. Camilla's office grew cautious overnight. Charles could not undo it. Anne would not dilute it. Yet the true turning point would not come from paperwork, procedure, or palace staff. As the palace adjusted to the new boundary, Anne found herself face to face with the one person who understood why protecting the past could shape the future. The turning point came in stillness. No secretaries, no advisors, no formal briefing notes. Just Anne and William, in a private room, with the Queen Mother's recommendation resting between them, like a verdict from another age. For once, neither of them rushed to speak. They both understood the same truth. This was not about revenge. It was about protection. William asked Anne what the recommendation meant to her, not as a royal instruction, but as a personal burden. The prince did not ask for a legal summary or a palace-approved explanation. He asked what it felt like to be chosen by a woman who had understood the monarchy's pressure better than almost anyone. Anne looked at the folder and admitted she had never expected the Queen Mother to leave such a direct expression of trust in her judgment. Anne did not soften the confession. She said the trust felt heavy because it reached beyond family affection. Custodial authority, meaning the duty to guard Anne's private wishes and control how sensitive materials are handled, was not a privilege she could enjoy. It was a promise she had to keep. William heard the strain in her voice, and he understood why it mattered. If she failed, the Queen Mother's private memory could become a tool for comfort, image, or convenience. William chose his words carefully. He told Anne the monarchy could not survive if private history became something people reshaped whenever truth felt uncomfortable. The future king knew private history mattered because it fed public trust. He also knew public trust mattered because the crown depends on people believing its memory has grains, not been polished into fiction. Anne watched him as he spoke, and her shock began turning into quiet resolve. Anne realized William was not asking her to fight a family battle. He was asking her to preserve a standard. Strict consultation, meaning careful approval before sensitive papers are seen, used, or explained, became the line they both accepted. The Queen Mother's papers would not move through emotional access. They would not be released because someone felt entitled. They would remain guarded by process, memory, and named responsibility. William gave Anne what the recommendation needed most: support across generations. His quiet agreement gave her role moral force beyond the archive room, because it connected the old royal world to the future one. Anne understood the meaning at once. She was no longer standing alone with a sealed folder and a painful duty. The prince had placed himself beside her, not loudly, not publicly, but firmly enough for the palace to feel it. The discovery could no longer stay buried in private rooms. Once Anne and William aligned, the recommendation became more than a family file. It became a statement about what kind of monarchy would survive the next era. And when the world finally caught sight of what had been uncovered, the story became larger than one family's private grief. By morning, the private shock had become public symbolism. Britain woke to a royal story that felt old and new at once. A sealed recommendation, a stunned princess, a boundary drawn around the Queen Mother's memory. What began inside an archive room now stood on breakfast tables, television screens, and palace gates, where the public tried to read meaning into every silence. Anne stepped into her next engagement with the kind of composure that made the story even louder. The palace had issued a restrained statement confirming that archival procedures connected to the Queen Mother's private papers had been reviewed. Archival procedures, in simple terms, are the rules for handling, recording, and protecting sensitive historical documents. That mattered because the statement did not deny the discovery. It quietly confirmed that something serious enough had happened to change how those papers would be controlled. Charles appeared at a separate event with tired restraint, and the king's silence sharpened the public mood. He did not challenge Anne. He did not explain Camilla. He simply carried the weight of a family judgment into the open. The palace wording avoided conflict, but the public understood the shape of it. Anne had become central, and Charles now seemed forced to accept that his grandmother's final wishes carried power beyond his personal comfort. Anne heard a question from the press and did not smile. She gave no dramatic answer, no emotional speech, no careless sentence that could feed the storm. That control mattered because silence can become authority when everyone expects denial. Observers noticed her face, then noticed her refusal to soften the moment. The princess looked less like someone embarrassed by attention and more like someone guarding something too serious for public performance. One front page defined the reaction. A national newspaper ran Anne beneath the headline, "The Final Trust," with a sealed archive box placed beside her image. That single phrase turned the document into a national symbol. It suggested that the Queen Mother had not merely left papers behind, she had left a test of character. Anne had passed it in public because she refused to turn the trust into spectacle. Crowds gathered outside Buckingham Palace, and the gates became a place of argument and emotion. Buckingham Palace, the monarch's main official London residence, matters because public feeling often gathers there when royal stories become bigger than family. Some people held flowers for the Queen Mother. Others debated whether Anne had become the keeper of the monarchy's conscience. Charles's supporters saw pain. Anne's supporters saw duty. Camilla's defenders saw exclusion dressed as tradition. The story grew because it touched something deeper than gossip. People understood that royal memory shapes national memory. They understood that whoever controls private papers can influence what future generations believe. Anne's calm made the discovery feel serious. Charles's restraint made it feel painful. Camilla's absence from the public response made it feel sharper. And beneath every headline, one message became impossible to avoid. The recommendation had changed the emotional balance of the monarchy. Anne was no longer just the stunned recipient of a buried instruction. She had become the visible guardian of a final judgment. But when the noise faded and the headlines moved on, the true meaning of the Queen Mother's final recommendation became painfully clear. In the end, the recommendation did not destroy the family. It revealed them. It showed who could carry history without bending it, who could accept restraint without calling it betrayal, and who still believed duty mattered, even when it wounded the heart. Princess Anne had been stunned at first, but by the end, she understood exactly why the Queen Mother had chosen her. Anne entered the final meeting without triumph. The palace formally recognized her custodial role over the Queen Mother's most sensitive private legacy materials, and she knew what that meant. A custodial role, in plain words, meant responsibility for guarding documents, letters, and wishes so they could not be misused or reshaped. It mattered, because royal memory does not only belong to the family, it shapes how the country understands the crown, and Anne now stood between that memory and anyone who might bend it. Charles accepted the decision with visible sadness. The king did not fight it, because fighting it would mean standing against his grandmother's final trust. He understood that love for family could not erase the obligations of history. Charles had spent years trying to protect peace, but this moment proved that peace without boundaries could become weakness. The monarch looked at Anne and saw not a sister winning influence, but a sister accepting pain he could not carry for her. Camilla remained outside the final judgment, not condemned, not publicly named, but unmistakably limited. The Queen Consort's position was not stripped in public, yet the boundary around the Queen Mother's memory stayed firm. That mattered, because silence can be sharper than accusation. Camilla could still stand beside Charles, but she could no longer stand inside every private story. The final recommendation had drawn a line rank could not erase. William's support made that line permanent. The prince had quietly confirmed that Anne's role was not a passing embarrassment or a temporary palace correction. It was a lasting standard for who could speak for the past. William understood that the future of monarchy depends on trust, and trust depends on memory that has not been polished for comfort. By standing with Anne, he carried the Queen Mother's warning into the next generation. Anne stood alone after the final meeting and touched the folder once. She did not smile. She did not celebrate. The princess simply accepted the burden because the Queen Mother had seen something in her that others had mistaken for coldness. Discipline, restraint, loyalty without hunger. The final recommendation meant that trust, once earned across a lifetime, could outlast rank, proximity, and personal desire. Anne became the keeper of a legacy because she had never tried to possess it. And with that, the monarchy was left with a final, unmistakable truth. The crown survives, not through those who reach for its memories, but through those strong enough to guard them in silence. Thanks for watching. Please don't forget to like and subscribe, and we will see you in next one.